Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Tuesday, April 29th. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The Texas game in 123 days, the game against Michigan in 214 days. If you're planning your next event, make it unforgettable with Grateful Griddle, Columbus's favorite food truck, serving up smash burgers, gourmet sandwiches, and good vibes. Book your catering today at GratefulGriddleOH.com. I know Kevin Noon of BuckeyeHuddle.com is planning his next event. By the time you watch this, he may actually already be in the car on the way to his next event. And that event is Southern Swing. It is an annual tradition Kevin and Marc Givler have been doing for quite a while. And Kevin, I know it involves a lot of driving, but besides spending quality time in the car with Marc, what is Southern Swing all about?
Yeah, Southern Swing is an opportunity to get out on the road and see players out at their high schools. I mean, we do not have full-fledged spring football in Ohio. So instead of sitting in Ohio lamenting the fact that we don't have full-fledged spring football, we go to places where they do. And with Ohio State recruiting nationally, we decided, well, let's go somewhere where the talent is, and that's generally the Southeast. So through the development of Southern Swing, and I really have no idea how many years it's been going on. At least 12, 13. If you told me 15, I wouldn't disagree. I used to be really good about keeping charts and how many miles we'd driven, and that hasn't necessarily been the case at this point. But we'll go out and we'll see players, whether or not it's at their practice or at their school or whatever the case may be, and get great interviews. And instead of relying on national interviews, like back when I was working for a network, where a kid is looking at 14 schools and you might get quotes on 6 of them, we can go and talk to him at length about his Ohio State impressions and things like that. So it's something that's still pretty unique in terms of what's going on in the in the space, and it's a labor of love because there's a lot of labor in it too.
There is a lot of labor, and as you know, thinking back to the college football playoff run that Ohio State went on, it was like, boy, this is a lot of time in hotels. You guys are about to do that as well. This is not a 3-day thing. This is not a 1-week thing. I know that you don't have a specific itinerary set because a lot of this is very fluid depending on when people are available and where you are. So you don't know yet, hey, on Tuesday, next Tuesday, we're going to be here and we're going to be talking to this player, or the Tuesday after that, or whatever it is. But just to give people a sense for what these trips are like, can you just sort of run us through just some of the basics? I don't need like a day-to-day, on this day we were in North Carolina, on this day, but just a basic route of where you guys went and some of the guys you maybe talked to last year, just to get a sense for what this year might be like.
Well, and to go back into the Wayback Machine, it started as a 1-week trip, and it started that we would just hit North Carolina and Georgia, and then we expanded to Florida. And I mean, we've gone as far out as Arizona. Now, we did fly to Arizona from Texas. We will drive to Texas, but yeah, I mean, we hit a good part of the Eastern Seaboard, and we'll hit the Gulf Coast, and we'll get into the state of Texas. And I've seen Jeremiah Smith, I've seen the Bosa brothers, I've any player largely out of the state of Florida that Ohio State has landed or been heavily involved in, had the opportunity to see. I've gone through Texas. Seen Jeffrey Okudah. I've seen, guys like Baron Browning. Last year we saw Devin Sanchez. I mean, that was a big get to be able to do that. We saw Zion Grady in the state of Alabama. He was the first player that we'd ever stopped to see in the state of Alabama. And, we've gone through all of these states, and it's kind of funny because there are like drive-through states, but as Ohio State's net gets wider and wider, and they're recruiting Alabama and Louisiana and Mississippi, those are no longer drive-through states. So, we are stopping and getting players there, and it's certainly kind of crazy with all that happens. I know that the trip is long enough that I'm not necessarily wanting to make it longer and go out to California, but they do recruit California. It'd be nice to go see Chris Henry Jr., but I've not been able to convince anybody to fly out to Orange County, California, my old stomping grounds.
Well, and I think people are probably right now saying, okay, sure, you're going and doing interviews, and that's great. You could do that over Zoom. We all learned that over COVID. Like, yeah, you can do a bunch of stuff over Zoom. There's a lot of stuff that are benefits to this that are long-term benefits, especially that you can't get over Zoom, meeting people in person, but also I'm guessing you're talking to coaches, you're talking to teachers, you're talking to people who know these players on a personal level. Plus, you meet someone in person, that kind of changes, makes it a little bit more of a real sort of interpersonal relationship and probably ends up with some better information down the line.
Well, that's the thing. It's about meeting people, about meeting the player. When you sit there, especially a lot of people are going to look at Southern Swing and be like, well, how many class of 26 guys are you going to talk to? And that's going to be a good number because the class has not necessarily come together yet, but it's also important for 27 and 28 to be able to get these relationships with these younger players. I'd been seeing Jeremiah Smith for several years prior to getting to Ohio State. And while Jeremiah isn't exactly somebody who's going to reach out to the media to say, hey, I'm doing this or I'm doing that, it didn't hurt to have that relationship with his coach at Shamda Madonna, which turns out a ton of talent. So it is that personal touch, talking to coaches, showing these players that, there's something about, oh, hey, hit me back on Twitter because they're not following you and you can't DM them or whatever, versus coming out to your school and talking to you and everything else. And, while I haven't necessarily had any direct conversations with Ohio State about this, I'm sure they don't mind that we're going out there and doing all this and showing just the level of interest in how much people want to know about you in terms of Ohio State. And I'm not saying that's ever changed a recruitment or anything, but, we are heroes. We just don't wear capes.
Yeah, you don't want to wear a cape. That's going to get all wrinkly. You have to iron it on that hotel ironing board. That's too much trouble. So people, I'm sure, are now going, okay, this sounds interesting. What does it look like from the perspective of someone who's just sort of following this? Or where is this stuff going to be? What are you planning on doing in terms of interviews and podcasts and that kind of stuff? And what's going to be on the message board at BuckeyeHuddle.com? What is this going to look like potentially from the viewer's perspective?
There's going to be a lot of opportunities. I mean, obviously, the crux of this is going and getting these extended video interviews, 8, 9, 10 minutes, sometimes 4. I mean, we're going during school in most cases, and everybody's got a study hall period or lunch or whatever, so we try to get you before school or whatever, but we're going to have written content. We know not everybody, again, if you're watching this podcast, you probably like podcasts, but some people don't. So there are going to be written stories. We're going to have skull sessions from Marc Givler, which is, kind of what you need to know to follow recruitments. It's kind of the real inside look at what's going on. We will have hungry huddles, which are our food segments. I mean, a lot of times that's dictated by how much time we have, especially if we have time to eat, which is not always in the books with all of this. We'll have some fun little one-off type of things. And then, of course, on the message board, we don't release our entire schedule. Why? Largely because we don't know exactly where we're going to go, because we are dealing with schools. We're dealing with coaches. We're dealing with administrators there. So sometimes we have to reverse the order of how we're going to hit kids on a specific day to work the schedule out. But we will post where we are. We'll post little tidbits. I mean, there are going to be a lot of things that we are going to make sure are unique to our subscribers, people who are members of BuckeyeHuddle.com, because ultimately you are the guys that make this, and gals, and no offense to Mika, got to sit there and say hi to Mika Hanna. You're the ones who make all of this possible with your interest and your membership to Buckeye Huddle. So, we really try to hit this from 6 or 7 different sides, and every year we go in with a lot of different ideas, and we generally execute on most of them.
Well, that trip will start on Tuesday. Going to have plenty of stuff coming to you for at least a couple of weeks, maybe more. Not always a set end date on these things either, as they're sort of working things out as they're on the road. So you can follow along through the entire Southern Swing at BuckeyeHuddle.com. As Kevin said, we generally will post a lot more detailed information there than we will share necessarily on some of our podcasts or YouTube channels, but we'll have a bunch of those interviews coming up on YouTube as well as all of your podcasts. So you can look forward to lots of recruiting content, unique, very different, very special, one-of-a-kind recruiting content coming up all May. The reason they do Southern Swing in May is usually kind of a quiet month in college football. A lot of coaches will go on vacation during this time. We don't go on vacation. It is just Kevin and Marc and the family truckster holding it down and getting you all sorts of fun, different, unique coverage, all at BuckeyeHuddle.com. Sign up today, get access to our huddle board presented by Jeff Ruby's Columbus. Should be a really exciting May there, and then head into camp season in June, and then July will be Big Ten Media Days, and then on to fall camp in August, and then all of a sudden the football season has started. Football season never really stops there at BuckeyeHuddle.com. That's where Tony, Kevin, and I cover the team. Marc covers recruiting, and we do have our whole team of X's and O's gurus there as well, all to make you a smarter football fan, all at BuckeyeHuddle.com. That'll do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.